paint fun and easy penguins with me with watercolor paint. These cute penguins, we are going to create them together, and it's going to be a fun exercise with sketching, and then we are going to paint them in and use some pencils for some details, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So this tutorial video is perfect when you are a beginner. And of course, if you have more experience, then still it's very fun to join along and have a nice, fun, creative moment, very mindful moment perhaps. But before we start, if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Sandra and I'm a watercolor artist and illustrator from the Netherlands. And I love to teach others how to draw and paint and also inspire others to create beautiful things. So if you like these kind of videos, then don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel. Then you see more of my content when it comes available. And I try to post these videos at least one time every week. So if you like this video, of course, I love it if you give it a thumbs up, then I know what content I need to create more. And just let me know in the comments what you liked most about it, and if there's any topic that you want me to create a video about, I would love to know. So let's just get started. Grab your paint supplies. I put a list in the description with the materials that you need, and you'll also see it on your screen in a few seconds. So grab your stuff and let's get started. So we are starting with the sketching, the drawing of the penguins. And for this, I created an outline for you to download, and you can use that as a reference. And I also created a sheet with a step-by-step explanation of how to draw those penguins. And then I'm also going to show you how I'm doing it so you can follow along. And as you can see, every penguin is different. I have ones with the wings going up and down, and just play around with this and have fun. Now, first of all, I want to apologize because probably I am pronouncing penguin wrong or will be pronouncing it differently all over this video because, I don't know, in Dutch it's penguin, in English I believe it's penguin or penguin, and I'm just like mixing it up a bit. So anyway, I hope that you are able to follow along with this sketching, and it probably is going a bit fast for you. So don't worry, you can always pause the video or slow it down a bit, and I hope that I gave you enough resources to also be able to follow along with the outline and the step-by-step page that I have made available as well. And once you have drawn everything, you can erase the lines that you don't need with a soft eraser. So just relax and do this sketching thing, and once you are ready with this, we can move on to the next part. So it's time to start with the fun part, and you may have noticed in the last piece of the previous video is that I used a kneading eraser to lift off the excess pencil off my paper. So before you start with the painting, I suggest that you do that, and then we will be able to start with the painting. Now for this, I wetted my watercolor paint with my spray bottle. This is to activate the paint. I am using a round brush, a size 6, and for the penguins I've decided to paint them blue. Of course they usually are black, but I prefer to paint with dark blue colors instead of black. And for these penguins, I decided to mix around with the blue tones that I have on my palette. So if you have several colors of blue to work with, that is perfect. If you only have one, that's totally fine. You can also play around with the amount of water you put on your brush to make lighter washes and more pigmented washes. And indigo blue is my favorite. Well, it's really one of my favorite colors. And as I said, I don't like to paint with black too often. And then indigo blue is my go-to for when I need to paint something that needs to be black. Then indigo blue is my go-to color. And I really love it for shading and darker effects. So the sketching part should be the hardest part, and at this point you have like a coloring sheet that you can color in using your brush and your paint. Of course, you use watercolor paper. It needs to be thick enough, and really pay attention to the amount of water that you use so that you don't make your paper too wet. But of course, wet enough that it's easy for you to brush everything. Play around. This is a really good exercise to play around with the amount of pigment you put on your brush, to play around with those darker washes and lighter washes. And one of the favorite things about watercolor for me is to drop in some more pigment or even a different color while the paint is still wet. This makes really beautiful textures once the paint dries, like the colors blend in beautifully together. And I love the characteristics of the watercolor, that it's like uneven and you have so many colors in one. I just love it so much. So play around with this, and if you like, you can always use different colors. I'm doing the blue, but you can pick other colors as well. This is your painting, and I suggest that you play around. So for now, we are doing like the blue parts of the penguin, and then later on we're going to do like the faces and the belly and everything. So I'm just going all over the paper, doing this one thing. That's, I guess, the way that I usually go about painting something, painting the things with the same colors. Well, as you notice, I have 2 jars of water, and the reason is that one I'm using to clean my brush and the other I'm using to grab some clean water on my brush for the painting. This way, the colors on my painting don't get too muddy. But I guess this is also the reason why, at least at first, when I start out a painting like this, I try to stay within the same color range, because then the colors don't get muddy either. So perhaps that's a little OCD thing I'm having, but it's just something that seems smart to do. Now, another thing that I can suggest is that you try to have some variety with the penguins. Like, you don't have 3 dark ones in a row and then 3 lighter ones in a row. Just mix it up a bit so you spread them out evenly all through your paper. So that way you have like beautiful composition and it is balanced. So I'll let you go on with this for a little bit and put on some music, and I'll get back to you when we move on to the next step. So now that we are almost done with the blues of our penguins, before we are going to move on to the next step, to those faces and the bellies, it's important to make sure that you let your paint dry. So you can just take your time to let it dry, or you can use a blow dryer, but make sure that your paint is dry before we move on to this next step. And for this next step, I decided to use like a light wash of my ochre. There's many ways you can go about it. Normally, when I want to paint like a white, of course you can't really paint a white on a watercolor paper, it's already white, but you want to have some shades, you want to have some like the depth of the penguin, so you want to use a color for that. Normally my go-to color is a light blue, a turquoise blue, very light. Only because of my painting, my penguins are already blue. I would like to have some more contrast, so I decided to go with this ochre because it's a nice complementary color for the blue. And as you can see, I gently go around the edges, staying within those lines, trying not to touch the blues, because even though the paint has dried, if I go over that with my water, I can wet it again, and then the color is starting to bleed within my ochre, and I don't want that to happen. At least I want to prevent it as much as I can. Of course, it's watercolor and it always can happen, and that's like not a totally big problem, but you want to avoid it the best you can. So go around those edges and then use some water on your brush to brush it out. And sometimes you need to clean your brush, you need to dry your brush, grab some clean water on your brush and just brush it out. Brush it on your paper towel or on your old rag, and just repeat that process. And this way you are getting a nice bit of shade around the edges, but you have like the visual effect of that it's still white, or well, it's just a little bit yellowish white. And later on we can perhaps use some gouache or some white color pencils to give it an extra effect, but for now I think this is the right way to go. And again, you can play around a bit with this, that some penguins have a darker belly than the others. That's totally fine. Just try to see this as a good exercise to create that darker shades on the edges. So I'm going to let you continue with this for a bit, putting on some music, and I'll get back to you for the next step. Again, for this next step, it's important that you first let your paint dry, and then once it's completely dried, it's time to add some details. So I am using my deep cadmium orange hue. I'm really loving this color. It's very highly pigmented, and I'm using my teeny tiny round brush to gently paint on those beaks. So we have covered it with the paint in the previous part of the tutorial, and that's no problem at all. You might be able to still see those pencil lines, and otherwise you just paint on a beak wherever you like. And with the same orange, we are also going to be painting those feet of the penguins. Just paint in within those pencil lines very gently and have fun. Now what I like to do to give this more depth, more color, more shade, is to add some darker orange on top of those beaks and those feet. And not covering the entire beak or feet, just like one side of it, and perhaps brush it out a little bit, but you want to have some shading there, and it's just giving it some extra color and contrast. And orange is always a very good color to contrast with blue. And now I'm going to use indigo blue, very highly pigmented, on my teeny tiny brush to gently paint on those eyes of the penguins. Now with some very light washed dark brown, I am gently painting in some strokes on top of those penguins, and I'm using my teeny tiny brush for that again, just to make it look a bit like some fur. And you can do it as dark and light as you would like. You can have some variation with it. You don't need to think about it too much where you are going to paint those fur strokes. It's just make it a bit more playful. And then another detail that's really going to finish off these penguins really nicely, with some white gouache and that same teeny tiny brush, add tiny dots on the eyes, and you can also add a tiny stripe on top of the beak. Now, of course, this is a very detailed work, so I can imagine that you find it a bit scary. No worries. If you want to, you can always try it out on a separate piece of paper first and just paint some blue dots on there or use a marker, and then with your brush and your white gouache try to give it really small dots. The trick to do is to use a really thin brush and make sure that you have a good amount of paint on your brush. Just play around with it a bit, and these penguins are starting to look really awesome. And now one of my personal favorite things to do is to add some texture with my pencils, colored pencils. I love the effect of the texture of pencils on my watercolor paper. So I'm only gently going over the paper, so not too hard, just gently, so that you create a beautiful texture and some shading. And one thing that I love about this is that I use just one or two colors and then cover the entire illustration with it. So this way, even though that I use different colors of blues or different tones of blues, with this one pencil color covering all the penguins, they become more of a whole. It just everything gets put together really lovely. So I'm going to use a few blue colored pencils, also a lighter and a darker one, and I'm going to use them all over the blues of the penguins. So gently just stroke and create some shading and just have a lot of fun with this. Of course, I can imagine that you might not have so many pencils as I do, so no worries, you can just pick the one blue pencil that you have or pick an entire other color. I'm also going to use a lighter color for those bellies and some orange probably to put on those beaks and on their feet, just to make it more playful. And this is just something that I love to do, and it gives it a beautiful illustrated look. Of course, it's entirely optional, so you don't even have to put pencil on top of this at all. Perhaps you're just satisfied with your watercolor paintings and you are already finished, and that's awesome as well. And otherwise, I'm just going to put on some music and let you continue with this, and then I see you once it's finished. So we are finished. We have created this really fun, cute penguins. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video, but of course I hope that you enjoyed creating these penguins yourself and that you are satisfied with the result. Of course, I always love to see what you have created. So please don't hesitate and share it on your socials, on your Insta, and tag me at Sandra Art Studio and use the hashtag #CreateWithSandras. This way I get to see what you have created, and if you want to, of course, I could give you feedback. I love to give that, but I just am so curious to what you create. And if you share it on your socials, then also other people get to see your beautiful creations as well and might join us, find me here and create these beautiful penguins with us as well, and all the other beautiful content you can create when you follow my video tutorials on my channel. So first of all, if you like this and you haven't yet subscribed, please do and hit that bell notification so you get a message every time I post a new video and you won't miss anything. And of course, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and put something down in the comments. I always love to read those as well. And if you can't get enough of creating and painting and sketching, then there are going to be a few videos on screen right now that you can watch next and that you can start creating even more beautiful things. So hope to see you there. See you in the next video. Good day. Bye.